Today I am replacing my old wallet, which I featured a couple of years ago on this channel, and we're basically making a brand new version, more reminiscent of the 1840 period with the scalloped front edges. This is typical of that time frame, and that's what I'm going to be building. And as is typical with Victor George, I'm going to show you my grid patterning method to show you step by step how to draw this pattern yourself. It's a fun little project. Be prepared when you pull this out in public to be inundated with some very positive comments. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm going to share this with you today. So let's go ahead and get started. Start with the supplies that you'll need to draw the pattern with. So the very first thing is I use an 8.5 by 14 inch cardstock, and that'll be perfect size for this build. I also have several size graph rulers, a 45-degree angle ruler, a circular template that has a 2.5 inch circle in it, a slot punch, a 3/4 inch slot punch, a fine point Sharpie or a pencil, and then a razor knife to cut the pattern out, or a pair of scissors, whatever you need. It'll be important that you have at least a 1 inch wide see-through ruler for part of this patterning. And let's go ahead and get started with the actual drawing. I forgot basically a quilter's ruler. These are really nice. So our very first measurement is going to be 5 1/4 by 14, the size of this paper. So the best thing to do here is just go ahead and put this on at 5 1/4. Make sure all your lines on the graph paper line up. The nice thing about this is it really gives an absolutely perfect rectangle, and that's what you want to at least start with. And now I'm just going to cut it out. Okay, so 5 1/4 by 14. Now we need to establish the bottom pocket, and the way I do that is I need to take the bottom and measure up 5 1/4 inches. So take any ruler that you want and just basically go up 5 1/4 inches. Again, and I'll probably say this more than once, just make sure all your lines line up. And then come over to this side, do the same thing. And then run a line across them. I'm trying to be quick, but it's also very important that all these lines are perpendicular and true. All right, so now we have the bottom set up, and this is going to be the fold up area from the bottom to where that gets glued and sewn. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take my pattern here next to it so I can show you basically what the next step will look like. And I will turn it over, and now we're going to draw in the scalloped front, establish the slot locations, and then we'll be on our way. So the first thing I do is I find the dead center of this 5 1/4 inch. Use a self-centering ruler or however else you want to do that. Okay. And just put a dot there, dead center of that. Now just take a 1 inch ruler and a pencil. Take your 1 inch wide ruler, place that directly on the center dot at the 1/2 inch mark of this 1 inch ruler, and set up your lines, make sure they're true, and then just take a pencil and run yourself that. All right, now we're going to establish the scallops, and all these measurements have been from previous prototype measurements, and this is the final numbers that I came up with. Save you a little bit of time doing them yourself. So from this corner here up, 2 1/8 inches. 2 1/8 inches. Put your little mark there. And 2 1/8 inches. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our 45-degree angle ruler. Leave that there so you can sort of see what I'm doing here. Now, using the bottom of this paper and the ruler itself, I'm going to slide it over until I get to that mark, that 2 1/8 inch mark. I'm going to make sure the bottom of the ruler is in line with that. Also take into consideration the width of the pencil, and I'm going to go basically an inch. That needs to be 3/4 of an inch, but right now I'm just going to do at least an inch. And we're going to do the same thing here. From that pencil mark, everything's lined up. All right. Now take these two 45-degree lines and give yourself a 3/4 inch mark. 3/4 an inch. Three-quarters of an inch. We're going to take our 2 1/2 inch circle, and we're going to go from this dot to this line. So we're just gonna, this is gonna give us our scallop. So we're gonna line up these marks. And then do the same over here. That is all it takes to give you your fancy scalloped edges for this 1840 style of wallet. Now I'm going to take an eighth of an inch off the top. And the reason I do that is just from, again, prototyping this pattern. An eighth of an inch is not much. It'll still work. But as far as I'm concerned, it just is a nicer finish, so to speak. So an eighth of an inch in this case, we will cut off the top. And now we are all set to establish our slots. The way I do that is, again, predetermined measurements. So from the top to on the center line to the bottom of the first set of slots, I'm going to go 2 1/8 inches. So I'm going to take 2 1/8. Make sure all my lines are good. Draw a line. And now from this line to the next bottom of the bottom slots is 3 5/8. So we're going to go 3 5/8. All right, looks good to me. And we're going to do that. That is our slot locations. The tool itself is going to use this line here as a guide, and we're going to split this outside 1 inch line just as we did here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for ease of demonstration, or at least to help you visualize the pattern as it develops. So this takes a little bit of time. You want to make sure that these slots are perfectly straight up and down. So from the top of this line, we're going to place our slot. We're going to center that line. Take my hat off here in case, and it is a little warm in here. It is Southern Arizona. All right, slot 1, again from the very bottom, centering that line the best you can. And it's nothing more than taking our knife or scissors or whatever you want and cutting the pattern out. So split the line, keep your tool straight up and down. Cut out your inside circles or your scallops. Right, that is our pattern. Now, we're going to have to cut a money pocket, and I'll show you that. Here's our money pocket. I just cut it out. It's 5 1/4 inches by 3 3/8. And this needs to be basically center of the slots. And the way the math works out on this particular build, it's right at 1.5 inches from this line. So just using a couple of measurements here. The bottom of this money pocket goes on that 1.5 inches. And then I'm just going to mark the pattern itself. Okay, that's your money pocket. And the math works out so the slots are right in the center of the money pocket, and these slots are correct here. So now we need one more slot for the bag strap or the binding strap. And the way I do that is you can eyeball it or just take from the top of these slots, go up 1/4 inch, and then just give you a line in there. And now that is where, again, you're gonna center that slot punch and eyeball it. That is your pattern. Now the only thing that we need to add, obviously in our pattern process, is our money pocket, a 12-inch strap by 3/4 inch. That'll be your binding strap. Now we need 2 of these. Now it's time to take our pattern, put it to leather. Now it's time to transfer the pattern onto leather of your choice. And in this particular case, I'm gonna tell on myself here. I bought this roll of leather at Hobby Lobby. For some reason, I just loved the coloration. It's about 3-4 ounce, and it's fairly nicely tempered. So you can use oil tan, you can use veg tan. 3-4, 4-5 is a good weight to use. Anyway, I love the colorations on this, especially for an 1840 looking wallet. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take a piece of the leather and we're gonna lay our pattern on there. And I won't bore you with the fine details here. It's nothing more than taking a sharp awl and tracing that onto your leather. And a nice thing to do is you can either tape that on there or you can set weights on there. You don't want that pattern to shift on you. It's a little problematic to get it back exactly. So once you have that, then go ahead and cut it out. As a matter of fact, cut out all your pieces. So we have our main piece here with all of the slots already set up. We have our money pocket. We have our 2 slot tabs, and we have our 12-inch binder strap. Now it's a matter of starting the fabrication process, and we're going to go through that fairly quickly, yet with hopefully enough information that you can do it on your own. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to find where our bottom folds up, and that's 5 1/4 inches. You can transfer that line however you want. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to fold it up and prep for gluing. So I've established my 5 1/4 inch lines for the fold up. From the pattern, I'm going to take, basically it's going to be a little more than 1/8 of an inch, and it's just these 2 sides here. There's the mark right there. And that's nothing more so that I can see basically where my glue lines go. Now you can use, a lot of people use that double-sided sewing aid tape. I don't have any, plus I've never used it, so it probably wouldn't go well for me. Anyway, a little old-fashioned, I'm using water-based Renya, And I like this contact cement. Now the glue has tacked up, and we're going to fold these corners. Oop, going to fold the corners up. And we're going to press the bottom really nicely. And we're going to go ahead and establish our stitch lines, 1/8 of an inch. I'll show you how we do the center line here later, which basically will separate the credit cards from the identification cards. Now just I like using a 5mm, and the very first prong I place over the top of the leather, and I'm just going to set it on there. Make sure it's in line, and make sure it's straight up and down, and establish where the bottom's going to be. Probably right there, it works for me. And then the second strike here. These stitching irons are pretty common. You can get it at makers, you can get it at weavers. I like the 5mm. Gives a very nice stitch spacing, as far as I'm concerned, for these old wallets. And now I'm going to go ahead and sew this up, and we'll be ready for some further fabrication. Now we're hand sewing the bottom half of this 1840 wallet, and of course you can use sewing machines. I'm using 5mm with the 0.08 Ritza type thread, and just doing a standard saddle stitch. I'm old school. I learned long before the internet, so I sew away from myself, so I don't do a cast stitch. And on my larger items, I don't use a groover. So anyway, just sew it up. You're going to back tack from the bottom, back tack from the top. This stand-up stitching horse is really handy for me. I had this during my harness repair days at the Tucson Rodeo Parade. I need to have somebody make me another one. And I'm using white thread here. It's a little off-white, but it's still pretty much white, just to show you the stitching at the end. Of course, use any type of light brown or any other color stitch that you like. I've never been a big fan of having a stitch that matches the item. I always like a little bit of contrast, but that is up to you. And you don't need it for this, but here's a nice little sewing aid. And I'm just going to do basically a double back tack. And we'll run this back through the back. So all the stitches are on the inside, all the ending stitches. And now our two sides are stitched up and ready for the next step. And I'll meet you at the main table. All right, got a little bit ahead of myself, but that's okay. I'm going to show you while I've got it in place. I went ahead and cut this to a round point Again, there's no rhyme or reason to, you can leave it square, you can clip the corners. All of a sudden, I just decided to do that. Anyway, the stitching is done on the bottom pockets, and so leaving it in this position here is more accurate for the time frame of this particular wallet. But because we carry credit cards today and identification cards today, here's how I simply establish the location for the stitch line. I can't find the tool I want, so I'm going to take my 5mm and I'm going to set the cards in there all the way in position, and I'm going to take any ruler basically and try to just eyeball the center. So I got the line even with the bottom. This looks like the top is pretty well centered here, and I'm just going to go ahead and draw a line right down the middle there, and do the same thing here. Is I'm going to take one tine and put it over the top. I'll stitch that up, and basically gives you plenty of room. Brand new, it'll hold 5 IDs and 5 credit cards. The money pocket here can literally hold money and more credit cards. But anyway, after a couple of months, that could hold 6. It'll stretch like all good leather does. Anyway, the next step now is we are going to glue up the money pocket. And while I've got the money pocket here, I want to show you, back before we could get all kinds of nice type or sets of stamps, of course we had old printer's type. And that's what I used a lot of times for my initials, and I still have it today. So anyway, if you don't have regular stamps, get you some vintage printer stamps. Now I've got this marked already for my glue line, and I'm going to go ahead and establish my glue and set that money pocket up, get ready for sewing, and then we are moving right along. So just glue in these areas here that I've marked out, also on the back here, and once that's done, we'll be back and ready to press it together. All right, so that'll be ready for the next sewing operation. The next sewing steps are basically setting in these tabs. So the way I do that is just put these in here like this. And pretty much center them. Any excess here will be trimmed off in a little bit. All right, those are pretty well centered. And now I'm gonna take my 5mm stitching iron, and you can measure. All you wanna do is go about 1/8 of an inch on the outside of that slot right there. And if you'll notice, the outside ends of the tines will be on each end of that 3/4 inch strap. So it'll really hold it in there very nicely, okay? So just that in there. And I'll do. Okay, so far we have all these sewing operations to do. And what else? Well, we'll need to sew this down here first before we put the money flap in. So let's go ahead and sew these tabs and this middle together, and then we'll put in the money pocket. So the sewing is complete. We double tacked at both ends. We hit the stitches with a hammer afterwards. We sewed in our tabs, and now it's time to skive them flat. This is an easy way for me to do it. Oops. You don't need to put any glue on there. After a few weeks of wearing that, those will stay down on their own. All right, we have that all set up. I think I already said that. I've loaded up the pockets to start them stretching a little bit. Now it's just a matter of establishing my glue lines for the top pocket. I've got all the corners marked. I'm just gonna glue those off camera real quick, set them, and then we'll prep for stitching. Go ahead and establish our stitch lines, 1/8 of an inch. And this top money pocket actually holds quite a bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to start again, one tying over the top of the money pocket. That's pretty close. All right, we are literally close to the end. So after I did the stitching, it's just a matter of tacking the stitches down. That basically closes up all the mini gaps. Now, before we put on the main strap, let's go ahead and spritz it a little bit. And not too much. We don't want to soak it, but we want to help form the pockets a little bit. And we're going to take our credit cards. I have 5. And 5 IDs. And then I have these card size pieces of plastic that I put in here. Take a bone folder, and we're just going to give a little bit of a crease line on each side of the stitches. That'll help to deepen the pockets a little bit. Let's see, I got that one already. Okay, we're gonna let that dry. Basically, we're all systems go. That should fold up to the top pocket. And once we take these out of there and we put the top strap on, we'll be all done. Let's go ahead and finish this up by attaching the binding strap. I've already pre-skived the end. You just run it in through the front. And you want the stitching is going to be right in this area here. You want that stitching to be into the meat, not to the skived part. So also, if you need to just tack something down, tight bond put a little bit down. And then just hold it for hold it for about 10 seconds. Now take your 5-prong and just in between the tab and the binding strap. And we're going to stitch that up. And I think I went ahead and dyed this. This sort of acts like a veg tan. It does absorb a little bit of dye. I experimented with a scrap piece. And anyway, I think I'll go ahead and dye it. These white stitches stand out a little bit too much. It doesn't really contrast to the point that I like. So I'm going to dye that, and then we're going to buff it and put a wax-based finish on there like, oh, I don't know. I'll show you that in just a second. I got 2 or 3 of them that I like. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stitch this up. We're going to go ahead and cut the strap to size, and then we can do some final details if we want to clean up the edges a little bit, pretty it up. But again, it's an 1840 wallet. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I've sewn the binding strap on. It's about 12 inches, and we're going to go ahead and fit it to size. I went ahead and loaded up the pockets to give it a little bit bulk, and it folds in right in top of the money pocket. We're going to fold that down, and we're going to run it through. You might need to open these up just a little bit to get it started. And as you can see, it's about 1.5 inches too long. And that's where you want the tip, because as you put more money into it, it'll rise up just a little bit. So anyway, now I may regret this step, but I just don't like that white stitching. So let's see. All right. So I tried this on a piece of scrap, and it does act a little bit like veg tan. So I've already dyed the strap. Let's just try it. Can't hurt. This is for a video build anyway. Take a little bit of the excess off of there. And this will color the threads a little bit. Yeah, I'm already starting to like that a little bit better. Yeah, it's starting to look like it's got a little age to it now. I think I'm going to go ahead and let that dry a little bit. I'm going to do the inside and then come back with a final note. And we'll call this a successful build. So I have a well-worn horsehair brush here. It's medium stiff bristles. As you can see, I've already brushed the surface from my dye job, and I'm going to take that and basically remove any of the little bit of residual pigment. And man, so that took the white stitches and sort of, I used buckskin dye, and it gave it that golden buckskin color. I'm really happy with that. I'm glad I went ahead and dyed it. And now it's ready for the final conditioner. So I take some high density neoprene, not neoprene, some high density foam, and I take my rosette cutter and I cut a bunch of them out, and I use these as my applicators. I'm gonna use Rudy's from Be Natural Leather Care, but I like BlackRock. I'm not sponsored by any of these. Skidmore's has been a long time favorite. Montana Pitch Blend has been around forever. I love this product. Also Aussie. And but anyway, I'm gonna use Rudy's, and I'm just gonna take a lid. Pour a little bit into my lid here. That's enough for 2 of them. Anyway, take my little sponge dauber here. Take off the excess, and then just rub it in. I love that range scar right there. I love these little flaws in this natural product, leather. And I'll let that work into itself there. And try not to get it on the flesh side if you can help it. I mean, it doesn't hurt it, but anyway. I'm at the end stages here. I spent, I don't know, a few hours doing this. This doesn't take long to make. It does when you're trying to film it. All right, I'm gonna let that dry. I'm gonna buff it up, and I'll come back with a few closing statements, and I hope you enjoyed this wallet build. Well, it's buffed out and ready to go. So hopefully you enjoyed this video build for this 1840s style wallet with the Era Correct scalloped front edge. And remember, everything is easy once you know how. Follow along with the pattern making process that I use to make this. Follow along with the fabrication steps that I use. And remember, everything's just a guideline. If there's something that you do differently, then just employ that. I'm just trying to show you what I do, and it works for me, kind of old school. So thank you again for following along, and put one of these in your pocket.